Welcome. Thanks for tuning in again. So, today we're going to talk about projections. And they are an incredible thing to understand and to work with. Because when we can see that all of life is just a projection of our own beliefs, our own stories, and our own way of being in the world, there's an incredible level of freedom that happens with that. There's an incredible level of ability to witness ourselves, to our ability, right, to really see something different, to see a deeper truth is a way that I love to talk about it. So first, a projection is basically when we're inside of anything, a conversation, when we're just sitting, looking outside at the world going by, when we are at work, when we are trying to create something new, whatever we are doing, there is a part of us that will be projecting who we are out onto the world, onto every situation, every circumstance, and every person that you come into contact with. You are engaging in projection. And this is why it can be so profound when you realize this and you start to hold sort of more of this like witness place, right, of yourself. And as you move through life and your world and your day, you are asking yourself the question of like, well, what am I making this mean? What am I projecting onto what is happening right now? So the other day, I was talking to some students after class, and another student had offered a story, and we'd all sat there and heard the same story. And afterwards, the three of us were talking about her story, and all three of us heard something different. And then we laughed because we were like, well, maybe none of us are right. Maybe she said something entirely different, right? And so each of us was witnessing her and her story through our own lens, through our own projection of what she was saying, through our own understanding of life. And this is a very simple, neutral idea, right? Neutral perspective or story that we're looking at. We can kind of see the humor in it. We can laugh about it. But what happens when you take something that's really potent and spicy and fiery in your life, like a relationship with somebody that you have a really hard time with? And this is where we can find exponential growth, right? When you take the situation and you say to yourself, well, what am I projecting on? Because what if what was happening was just neutral? What if what was happening didn't mean what I was making it mean? Things start to change a lot from that space, right? And now I'm not saying this to negate other people's behavior, right? We can still hold the space for possibly what is happening, right? What that other person is doing, saying, showing up as is not okay, right? This practice doesn't make other people's behavior okay. It doesn't say that you have to put up with it. It actually empowers you, is what it does. Because say, somebody comes to you, they say something that most times as humans, we end up taking personally. And this is where we can find a lot of freedom in projection, right? In owning our own projections, because it gives us the space to recognize that I might be taking that personally when really it actually has absolutely nothing to do with me. But because I might have had an experience previously that the same thing, let's say, happened, right? Like we think it's the same thing. So now we have sort of a filter there. And so when someone else comes in, they might be doing something different, but we automatically put our filter onto the situation, and now we're seeing it through that lens. So a big one for me when I was younger was abandonment, right? I had a lot of things that happened in my young life that created an incredibly deep and wide wound of abandonment. So fast forward into my 20s, and what do you think I saw everywhere? People abandoning me, friends, work, colleagues, all kinds of things, right? Anytime, I remember I was on a bike ride with some friends, and we're not like having a leisurely bike ride. We're like training, we're riding. And they got ahead of me and they kept going. I pulled my bike over and was crying, like a grown woman crying because her friends left her on the bike. And it was an incredible moment for me because what I saw inside of it was how my abandonment wound was being projected onto my friends. They didn't leave me. We were all going to end at the same destination. The coffee shop we were actually going to stop at was like a mile up the road. They did not leave me. But oh my goodness, that little girl in me was deep in her abandonment wound and she was projecting it out everywhere. And so I just sat there on the side of the road, had a little cry, and then I realized what the heck was happening. And I was like, oh, this is another layer of this wound just showing itself so that I can do something with it. And I just kind of gave myself a hug, had some kind words for myself, got back on my bike, rode to the coffee shop, and had a great time with my friends. However, could you imagine if I hadn't self-reflected? I could have easily cried all the way to the coffee shop and then like been really upset with my friends. Or maybe I kept riding and didn't even go to the coffee shop because the thoughts in my head are like, fine, they leave me, I don't need them anyway, I'm just gonna go home. And you know what happens, right? As we start to spin and spiral and we get caught in those stories that are literally just a projection of a wound that we've been carrying for years, decades for me at this point, right? And so it is so empowering to own your projections because it changed that whole situation for me in that moment, right? I got to heal a little. I got to let some emotion go. I got to like laugh with my friends about it because I actually, when I got to the coffee shop, they were both also spiritual women on a journey doing the work. And so I told them what happened. And we all got to laugh about it. And then they got to tell me some stories about theirs, and it became like a healing conversation as well. But if I had not had the willingness or the tools to own that projection, that could have gone really differently. And that could have changed our friendship at some point, right? Because if I show up so in my wounding without any personal responsibility of what is actually going on for me, I'm taking a very neutral situation and I'm charging it with my wound. And that can activate other people's wounding, right? So imagine in that situation, if I had gotten off my bike at the coffee shop and been all like in a bad mood or kind of like even a little bit of aggressive with my friends, or maybe, you know, silent treatment, or what's wrong with you? I'm nothing, I'm fine. You know, like all of these different ways of moving through our uncomfortability that show up. These are all just our patterns and programs, right? There's something that lives in the unconscious that we have touched and that we are now in relationship with, and we have an opportunity to decide how do we want to be in relationship with that unconscious part of us as it's being shown. And had I just kind of engaged in the unconscious behavior, that gives other people also like the opportunity to engage in unconscious behavior. And that time at the coffee shop could have been ruined. We could have ended up just all sort of being snippy with each other or arguing about it, or then their wounding would have come up and be like, we didn't leave you, what do you mean? And maybe I couldn't see it. So when we really have the tool of self-reflection about our projections, we change our future. We change our relationships. We change our relationship with ourselves as well, right? In that ability to sit, that I sat with that younger part of me and had a conversation with her so that she really recognized that she wasn't being abandoned. And she was able to see the neutrality of the situation because I chose to be with her, me, myself, right? Be with myself in those hard, uncomfortable places and own what was happening for me. And then I could step forward with a very different approach and a very much more grounded, much more boundaried. There's so much less people pleasing, right? And you just drop the story. Like, why would I want to hold on to a story that my friends left me that wasn't true? I guess sometimes we can hold on to them and that we need to. We need to see something deeper. And so we need to hold and cling to it for a little bit longer. But ultimately, like when I said that, right, what I even see, like as I said, clinging to me, it's like just this little baby part of us that's just clinging, and it's saying like, please, please help me see something different, help me get out of this place. And that's what the gift that our uncomfortableness gives us, is really our ability to be with ourselves in a deeper way, in a much more loving way, in a much more protective way, in a much more nurturing way. All of these things you can give to yourself, right? In that example, if I had stayed in that projection, what I would have ultimately been doing was wanting my friends to give me the validation that I actually needed from myself. And even if my friends had, said, oh my gosh, we didn't leave you, we're so sorry, and blah, blah, blah. The part of me that was looking for validation, it would have gotten some satiation. However, I know myself. At that point in my life, right, I would have just blown that off. I would have thought underneath, like, yeah, they're just saying that because they feel like bad that they left me, or, I wouldn't have been able to receive their love. Wouldn't have been able to receive their apology or receive the way that they were trying to nurture me, because I couldn't receive it from myself. And if you can't receive it from yourself, you can't receive it from others. It's just how we're made. So I was the one that needed my own loving. I was the one that needed to be with me and give myself the validation and the nurturing that I didn't get as a kid in those sorts of situations. And then because I gave that to myself, then I was able to be different with my friends and receive what they did offer me, right? They offered humor, they offered love, they offered connection. And because I had been willing to receive it from myself first, I then was available to receive it from them. So this is the beautiful gift when we own our projections. It allows us to receive so much more deeply, because you have to be able to receive from yourself first. So these are the types of conversations that we have both in the devotion codes and in the journey. There's links to in the show notes to both of these offerings. The devotion codes is free. It's on Substack. And if you're already a follower of ours on Substack, then you can drop right in. If not, the link in the show notes will take you to where you can subscribe for free and get access to the devotion codes, where projections, boundaries, lots of different things, right? The devotion codes are all about how do you love yourself more deeply in devotion to yourself and your purpose and the path that you're here to walk. And then the journey is our group mentorship portal that is incredible. The women in there are so inspiring, and this is the place where we really dive deep into all of these things, and you get to work one-on-one with me inside of our portal there. We have live calls every month. We have content that we're working through. We're growing. We're deepening our spiritual practices, our intuition, our intimacy, our relationship with ourself, with life, with all the things. Oh my gosh, I can't say enough good things about it. There's a link in the show notes. Check it out. You can also reach out to me, hello@sarahnoble.com. I'd love to answer any questions, and come join us. Let's make some magic together.